Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey guys, and welcome to the Mentor Nation podcast. I'm your host, John Abbas, and on this show, we interview incredible and unique entrepreneurs from all over the world. We distill their journeys, stories, and strategies into practical and applicable advice that you can use to enhance your own life. My goal here is for you to feel like you have a personal mentor through these episodes where the guests are sharing things that ultimately save you time, frustration, and give you perspective. Almost all of the guests I interview are self-made, and I do this on purpose so that you know they too went through all of the ups and downs on the road to success. And so what they share in these interviews are from personal experience and will absolutely be of value to you if you just pay attention. So let's talk about this episode. Storytelling is as old as civilization and is still the single most powerful way on earth to build a vision, elicit emotion, and establish a relationship with people. Whether it's your favorite movie, Elon Musk releasing a new Tesla, or the late Steve Jobs talking about the new iPhone, it's the stories they tell that draw us in and create the emotional connection that establish the know, like, and trust necessary for a win-win transaction. Kindra Hall, she's decoded the framework to telling powerful stories. She is the best-selling author of the book Stories That Stick: How Storytelling Can Captivate Customers, Influence Audiences, and Transform Your Business. She's also one of the best storytellers on the planet and has the award to prove it. Yes, there are actually competitions for storytelling around the world. After this interview today, I can tell you with certainty that she is one of the most outgoing, bubbly, and fun people that I've ever met. In today's episode, we talk about how to harness the power of storytelling to grow your brand, your business, or just flat out communicate better. Kindra will help you understand that regardless of who you are, you have powerful experiences in your life that you can turn into stories, and she shares how to tell those stories in a way that creates rapport with people quickly. I am especially excited to share with you this because I have always known the power of telling stories, but I really never had or knew of a structure for doing it or putting these stories together. Before I bring Kindra on, I want to share something really important with you. We are getting close to launching our new mobile app called Mentor. For those of you listening that don't know what that is, it's a peer-to-peer learning platform that we have been building for over a year now. It's kind of like Airbnb, but for learning instead. And I'm telling you this because imagine being able to learn anything in the world hands-on by finding a mentor or shadowing someone in their day-to-day. And then on the flip side, also imagine you could be a mentor on the platform and teach what you love or your passion, either virtually, in person, or by letting someone shadow you, and you can earn income wherever and whenever you want. We are getting really close to launch, and you can learn more and be a part of the beta if you are interested by going to www.getmentor.com. Now, mentor spelled a little funny. It's www.getmentr.com. There's no O. So with that being said, guys, let's welcome Kindra to the show. All right, Kindra, welcome to the Mentor Nation podcast, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, John. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I've been looking forward to it for some time. And, for the audience listening, I'm just really excited for you guys, especially because today we're going to help the listeners market better, sell better, and develop better relationships faster by incorporating something that you are an expert at, which is storytelling. And I know that you have a new book out that is absolutely crushing it on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it's called Stories That Stick, which I know the audience, as soon as this interview is over, is going to pick that up right away. And I'm really excited to take a dive into that today. But first, I just wanted to see if you wouldn't mind telling us a quick story about your background and just how you became the authority in storytelling for thousands of entrepreneurs and big corporations. I just can't wait to hear that.
It's a funny story, but I think especially as, as an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur listeners, I think you know that sometimes you find a career and sometimes a career finds you. So
That's right.
this for me really started as a hobby. I told my first story when I was 11 and I was in fifth grade. And certainly as a fifth grader, I did not have a vision for starting a company or becoming an expert. I just told a story. But what happened was I told it was an assignment for fifth grade. I told the story to a classroom of third graders. And much like the current climate now for messaging, for marketing, for sales, I walked into this classroom of third graders and they were beyond distracted. Like it was the end of the day, it was the end of the school year, and I was supposed to read them a book. And I could tell that wasn't going to go over very well. So I put the book down and decided to just tell the story. And it took maybe 3 sentences, and all the third graders were sitting down on the rug, all eyes on me. And I remember thinking, like, maybe I'm onto something here. Like this isn't a bad gig. And so throughout the rest of elementary school into middle school, I was on the speech team. In high school, I was telling stories, and I would do it, like at my church or at birthday parties or for talent shows. It was always for entertainment. But then later on in high school, I entered a national storytelling competition, which I know you all know that's a thing. And then I won that competition, and the grand prize was I got to tell a story at the National Storytelling Festival, which I know, John, you're based in Nashville. It actually happens in East Tennessee. It's the first weekend in October in this little town called Jonesboro. Now, Jonesboro.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And there's no stoplights in Jonesboro. Like it is a one street town, but every October the street floods with 15,000 people who all come to hear these storytellers. And I was there to tell a story. I was there to hear these storytellers. And I remember listening to the stories and noticing that all around me, no matter the age, no matter the background, no matter the person, everyone was captivated by these stories. And, at that point I thought, okay, well, I don't want to, there aren't that many storytelling festivals to tell at. And I wanted to, I wanted a big, powerful job. I wanted to make money. I knew this even as in my early 20s.
That's right.
So I didn't really see how storytelling at festivals and my other career goals were going to come together. And I always think that that's, a crossroads that entrepreneurs find themselves at. You don't always know how these two things that seem contradictory could ever work. And so you choose one path. But for me, I chose to go into marketing. I chose to go into sales, but the stories kept following me. And I realized that, if I wanted to be good at sales, I needed to be telling stories. And if I wanted better marketing, I needed to be telling stories. And so that's really when the shift happened. And now this thing that I did as a hobby is really a skill that I think everyone in business needs to know about, needs to trust, needs to invest in, and needs to use. And not only that, everyone has these stories. So what better thing to pursue?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on, I want to backtrack. So your prize for winning first place in a storytelling competition was to tell a story.
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of hoping it would be like a college scholarship or a new car, but no, it was just to tell that story again.
In Jonesboro.
Yeah.
That's really
but, you just never know. You never know where the opportunities are going to come from.
Absolutely. So did you publish yourself first or start a blog? Because I know, the book came out recently, but you have been a consultant for quite a while. How did that turn into a business?
So that's such a great question. Out of graduate school, I got a job. I was a director of marketing and then VP of sales. And I was always telling stories. And I kind of had this sense that now, and at the company, they still weren't entirely convinced that should be the primary focus. There were some other things that weren't quite working. And I just got this sense that maybe I was meant for something different. So I quit the job with no real plan except to blog. I mean, and that's when blogging, I mean, I was still publishing things on MySpace at that point. So, which shows you how far back that goes.
What? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. But so I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to be a storyteller. And I just didn't really know what that was going to look like. So one of the things that I did was I self-published a collection of stories. I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll write story books that are filled with my stories, like Irma Bombeck or, and now essayists, it's a lot more common, but at the time it really wasn't. And then at the same time, I was doing like volunteer work for my like various local charities where I lived. And I was always talking about storytelling. There were various thought leaders and other authors who had kind of heard about my storytelling because I sent them my self-published book and asked me to help them with their stories. And one of those mentors actually said, you know, if you can teach people to do what you do for me, which was help him find his stories, you might really have a career there. And so then I thought, okay, maybe I need to get this message out there more. So I looked at speaking, and that I really started, I kind of put together a hour-long talk about storytelling, and then just started pitching various organizations saying, don't you want a storyteller to come to your luncheon? And that's where keynote speaking really took off. And then from there, it was time to write my real book, is what I call it.
Gotcha. So, and I'm so interested to dive into this because I truly believe, even when I was reading your book, that what you're teaching is going to become more and more and more relevant as time goes on, just because, you know, marketing is becoming everything and people's attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter, and we have less and less time to connect with an audience or we lose them. So I wanted to ask you, you know, what exactly is effective storytelling and what are the benefits for companies, businesses, brands to do it correctly?
That's such a great question. And to that end, this issue of attention, I would say, I don't know that our attention spans are actually getting shorter, but we are getting smarter. Like we are getting more selective about the things that we want to listen to and the things that we want to watch and the ads that we want to consume. And so we're really quick when we don't resonate with something or when it's annoying to us or it doesn't pique our interests to just turn it off, click it out, skip it all together. And that's where we have storytelling is creating a real opportunity because humans as people, we want to hear stories. Like that is what will stop us and draw us in. And really what ends up happening is when you're using stories to share your message, it turns into, it's not even marketing anymore. It's just human communication. And you don't have to try to fight for their attention. They will give it to you if you're telling real stories. So I think that you know, we can go into like what a real story is, but that's the shift that I'm hoping, whether it's this book or this keynote or these podcasts or this message as a whole is like, listen, it has nothing to do with you know, people's attention spans. It has to do with the quality of message. So, and stories are what we want to hear.
That's really awesome that you said that because, you know, I see all over my Facebook, there's these pictures of a goldfish in a tank and they use it for marketing purposes, right? They're like the average attention span of a goldfish is 11 seconds. For a person, it's 7. And then this. So I love your take on that. And you said something really cool a minute ago that we can go into, you know, telling a story. So can you expand on that a little bit? Like, you know, what makes a great story? How do you tell a great story? What's the main thing that you teach, obviously, when you're teaching audiences how to become better storytellers?
Yeah, I think that's one of the really important a really important piece of my mission is I do know, I mean, I've done interviews before. Somebody said to me, wow, storytelling is really having a moment. And I was like, or this is just part of what it means to be human, but we'll put a pin in that. But I know that storytelling has achieved buzzword status. Like people are talking about this, which is crazy for me. This thing that I used to do when I was a kid is now like my dad's finally proud of me in that I'm a professional storyteller. But where I think storytelling goes wrong is a lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of talk about it, but there's a very little direction on what that really looks like and what a true story entails. So in Stories That Stick, in the work that I do, I had a very specific goal, which was to not only talk about how important storytelling is, why you should be telling stories, but how. Like, how do you put this together? And of course, there's a lot more in the book, but one of the things that we could talk about here that that you can really just take and act on is our team conducted a research study to put to test these 4 components that over now the decades of my career I've been like inserting into story wannabe messages, right? These messages that people are like, oh, this is a story. And I'm like, no, this is just marketing copy. So I've been inserting these 4 components in. And so we tested them to see, is a message without these components versus a message with these components, are these stories more compelling? Are they more persuasive? Are they more engaging? Are they more memorable? And the answer is yes. So the 4 components that your messages need in order to A, make them stories, and then B, subsequently make them better, are to have identifiable characters. And this isn't a brand. Like, a character isn't a brand. That's where people go wrong. They're like, well, this is our brand. This is our story. No, you don't, like, no children's book that you read that was actually a story talked about a brand. It had people in it, very specific people that you could identify and identify with. So take a look at your messages. Do they have people in them? And again, not groups of people, not like, oh, all of our customers. No, give me one of your customers. So that's the first one, is identifiable characters. The second thing that a story needs is authentic emotion. And this is where I think a lot of stories don't get told, is we think that a story equates to a movie that belongs on the silver screen, some over the top hero's journey or tragic moment. And that's just not the case. We need authentic emotions that can happen on a day-to-day basis for humans. There's frustration, there's anxiety, there's guilt, there's embarrassment, there's hope, there's all these things. I mean, and I don't know about you, but it's not even noon. Well, it's noon where I am, where we're recording this. And I felt all of those things just this morning, right? So, and today's been just kind of a normal day. So just to have real emotion in the stories that humans can connect to is the second component. The third component, and this one gets a little bit tricky to explain, but stories need to come all the way down to a moment, a particular place in time and space or a circumstance, so that as your audience is experiencing the story, whether they're reading it, whether they're listening to it, whether they're watching it, they can put themselves in that place and therefore also connect it to that place in their own life. So maybe it's an office, maybe it's out on a playground, maybe it's in a car, but just take your audience to some particular place so they can go there with their imaginations. And then lastly, you need specific details. And the more specific, the better. That will engage what I call the co-creative process, where your audience is co-creating this story in their own mind using details from their life.
This is so good, because I can honestly tell you that as a business owner myself, when I think of a story, I think of a movie, right? Like, you have an hour and a half to 2 hours to, understand the characters and relate to them. And there's the plot, and, you have that time to establish that emotional connection. But as a business owner, in your marketing and you're building your brand, it's just like, oh my gosh, I don't have that much time. So it's so awesome that you provided a framework, which is so helpful. And just for the audience, I want to review that really quick. Number 1, the 4 key components is identifiable characters. Number 2, authentic emotion. Number 3, and if I'm saying number 3 right, like a moment where the audience can connect with your brand, like at a place in their own life. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be more. It doesn't have to be too complicated. It could just be like, if you're telling a story, where is it happening? Is it on a Tuesday morning? Is it sitting at your desk? Is it on the subway? I'm in New York. Is it on the subway? Like, where? Set the scene so that they can be standing or sitting or walking there with you.
Got it. And then number 4, specific details. So let me ask you this. How can anybody, let's say you're teaching your kids, because I know you have kids, like, how can you, other than just practice, Like, what advice would you give if somebody wanted to become a better storyteller?
I would say, you mentioned practice, which is funny actually, because I hate practicing. I've hated practicing my whole life. I wouldn't practice on the speech team. I wouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, because here's the thing. This actually is an interesting point. So I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this podcast so that I can make a note of this because I don't have anything to write on right now. But here's the important thing about storytelling. Is storytelling requires an audience. It isn't just a one-way street. It requires the feedback from the audience, whether that's live feedback or whether that's comments on social media posts. Like for a story to really reach its full potential, it needs an audience. Otherwise you really won't know the story very well. So I think it's difficult to practice, if you will, storytelling in a vacuum. So what I would say instead, so it is repetition. So to get better at storytelling, you need to be telling more stories. Here's one of the great opportunities of our time. Because back in the day when I was telling stories, originally when I was trying to figure out the story, the only place you really told stories, blogging wasn't quite a thing yet. Right. You had to find storytelling festivals. And now you can turn everyday social media posts into repetition of practicing your stories, which isn't practicing, right? It's actually, I think of practicing as like, you're alone and you're just doing the drills, but here you actually get the audience feedback. So that's one of the things that I would say is right now, take a look at those small places where you can start activating, telling your stories. Maybe you have a team and you have a team meeting every Monday morning. Next Monday, tell a story to open that meeting. Maybe you send out weekly emails to your list. Open that email with the story. If you're doing anything on social media today, after listening to this podcast, post a story that includes those 4 key components. And again, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can just be very small, but over time you'll see the effects that stories have, the rise in engagement, the feedback that comes back to you. And that'll just over time, application, not practice in a vacuum, will make you better.
That's awesome. You hear that, guys? Kindra gave some homework and every one of you better do it because...
Ooh, and you should tag me if you do it on social media too.
I totally will do that. And I just have a couple more questions. So I wanted to get a real life example. Is there a brand or a company that you follow that is just really doing storytelling right? Or just something that's impressed you lately or recently that you're like, wow, they do a great job at those 4 key components?
Gosh, that is such an interesting question. Because on my mind is a brand that did it so wrong recently.
Oh, well, that was my second question. Let's go into the wrong one first.
Okay. Well, there is just over the holiday season, Peloton released a ad. Do you by chance?
Yes.
Yeah. So Peloton released this ad about this woman who gets a Peloton for a gift. And then she starts using it, every day or whatever. And then 1 year later at the holidays, she shows her husband who gave her the Peloton this video of all the compilations of her using the Peloton saying thank you. And the poor ad got ridiculed. I mean, to the point where Ryan Reynolds
I saw that. He used her for the gin commercial.
Exactly. Just genius. And here's the thing. I just think that, ad chaining is a new thing. Like how big can you, so I think the backlash was overdone just as a rule. But the reason people were backlashing is because the brand made this huge mistake in that they, for 2 reasons. Number one, Peloton has hundreds of thousands, if not, I don't know how many bikes they've sold. Right. I don't know how many customers they have. But it was obvious that this was just a marketing script that they put together and some agency filmed and they hired some actresses and actors and whatever. Right. The huge tragedy here is they have so many real life stories. Like I was gifted a Peloton for Mother's Day. Like they could have called me and told my story. You know what I mean? They had so many of these. And so that's one thing that I want to share with you. Anyone who's listening, if you have customers, you have stories. You just have to go ask them. And then when you ask them, have them share that story with you. Like there is this whole story behind when I got a Peloton as a gift. And I am one person who no longer owns a Peloton, by the way, because we moved into an apartment in New York City and there just isn't room. Though actually the guys in the apartment below us, I am sitting right above their Peloton. I'm off track here, but where they went so wrong is they have all these stories at their disposal and they didn't tell them. And that mistake happens for entrepreneurs, for small business, for big business owners all the time. You try to tell generic stories. And that goes back to what I'm saying is that your audience, they're smarter now. We can sniff that out. And then the other big mistake that they made with that commercial is one of the reasons that people were so up in arms is because this woman was, everyone's joking, like 116-pound woman gets a Peloton for Christmas. And by Christmas the next year, she's to her ideal weight of 111 pounds, right? So they're losing their minds over this skinny woman getting skinnier. And what are we saying? But here's where they went wrong. And there's another framework so I mentioned the 4 components here on this podcast, but in the book, I talk about a framework, like how do you fit these 4 components together? And one of the first part of this framework is establishing the normal, like what was. And what Peloton did is they basically started this commercial in the middle of the story. Woman gets bike for Christmas. When really what they should have done is, yeah, fine. Okay, maybe she is 116 pounds, but maybe she used to go to the gym all the time because that was her me time. And that was how she got her anxiety out, or how she cleared her head, or just how she felt good about herself, or how she felt connected to her own body. But then maybe she got a promotion at work, or maybe she had a child. And yes, okay, so it isn't about how much she weighs, but it's about her connection to her own self. And she let that go because she just couldn't fit it into her life. If they had told that part of the story first, and then the Peloton bike showed up, and then she got back to herself again, it would have been an entirely different story. They left out the beginning of the story. And so missed a huge opportunity.
That's so true. And just to go back to the good example, I think Coca-Cola actually does a pretty decent job, especially around the holiday times, like when you're in the movie theater.
Or Chick-fil-A has been doing a new thing where they have these couch sessions. They're getting close to it, right? Where they have an employee and a customer, and they sit there and tell the story of their interaction. And they're taking actual customers and actual employees, and they're just telling the story of that interaction, which is such a beautiful, like it's real, it's there. So we're getting there. That's awesome. Well, I know we are out of time, but I want to make sure I take a minute and just have you share with the audience the best place to connect with you, where they can pick up your book, which your book's everywhere. So Amazon, obviously, but if people want to follow you, if people want to stay on top of what you're teaching and what you're doing, what's the best place for them to be able to do that? Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, my website is kindrahall.com, and there it has any announcements. We host our own storytelling workshops. So they're one day long. They happen all over the country. So information on that is there. I'm also on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Kindra Hall fan. Again, dating myself back to when followers on Facebook were called fans. And then on Instagram, it is at Kindra Hall, and it's KINDRAHALL. And I also send out weekly storytelling videos that will help you keep your storytelling skills sharp. So you can sign up to get those videos on my website, again, at kindrahall.com. And stories that stick, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, airports across the country. I hope you get the book, and I hope you love the book.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, guys, I know a lot of you are in the direct sales because that was my original background. Kindra does an absolutely stellar job as a keynote speaker. So if you're listening to this and you are an executive with one of the big companies, her speech blew me away when I listened to one that she did for Rodan & Fields. So definitely look her up for that. Kindra, it has been an absolute pleasure. I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on today. And I know the audience is just going to love this episode.
I just can't wait. I hope we all get connected, and I can't wait to hear the stories you tell.
Absolutely. Thank you again. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Kindra. If you did, roll on over to Amazon, get her book, Stories That Stick. Spend a day reading it, and after you read it, if you enjoyed it, leave her a good review on Amazon. Also, this is the last episode for 2019. 2020 is just a couple of days away, and if you haven't yet, make sure you get clarity on your year. I don't want to tell you to set a bunch of goals, get your routines together. Me personally, I really believe that the starting point of all achievement is clarity. Taking the time to think about what you want and why you want it. If you can get that part right, everything else becomes much easier. Setting goals becomes easier. Taking the right actions becomes easier. And if you are going to set goals, I really hope that one of them is to follow us on Instagram at Mentor Nation Podcast. I'm just kidding, but not really. It's definitely the place to connect with me. I hope all of you have a wonderful new year. If you are listening to this live, if you are not listening to this live, I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I will see you next week with another killer value-packed episode. Take care, guys.